This has been quite the sanity and hair-saving writing hack for me on this freelance journey of mine thus far. So growing up, I was always advised against the proofreading of my own writings, and that did make a lot of sense to me. Because I guess it's like how we have blind spots and we can't literally see ourselves from the outside. That's why we need someone to tell us when some immature fool has stuck a stupid sticker onto our back, right? Well, if and when we read our own things, that is, our own writings to ourselves in our own heads, we just don't hear and see it with fresh eyes and ears, and we're not going to have that novel experience that is probably more helpful for seeing and spotting writing errors, mistakes, and perhaps even logical breakdowns. And before the age of the internet and this rise of artificial intelligence, traditional writers and publishing houses, if I remember it correctly, would have in-house editors and proofreaders for their greatest authors who were the ones who were likely going to be raking in the greatest amount of profits for them. But what happened if you were a freelancer and wasn't a part of any group or organization? Back then, and still to this day, try to get a solid proofreader for your writings can get very expensive very quickly, especially if you have a lot of writings to be proofread. What about getting a spouse or close family member to do some proofreading for you then? Well, if you've got a bit of wisdom and some common sense, you wouldn't want to obligate them. And if you cared a lot about them too, I'd say you definitely wouldn't even attempt to ask them in the first place. Because you should always keep this in mind. Everyone's got busy lives, and you're always better off having 100 people owe you rather than you owing 100 people. So, I wouldn't be asking a spouse or any close relative unless I was really in a pinch or bind. Then perhaps, plus if you're a professional writer, meaning if you write for a living and especially full-time, most of your close relatives are probably not even going to be as great a writer as you, right? So considering all that, it might just be kind of self-defeating request and pointless favor of you to be asking of them to begin with. So should you just shun, eschew, and forgo this whole proofreading phase and section of the whole writing process then? Absolutely not. And especially if you're commercially writing. It is always smart and wise to proofread, and to proofread your writings a lot. Why? Because if you're writing for yourself, a friend or family member, errors and mistakes are not going to harm your livelihood nearly as much or at all as they probably will with your business/commercial writings, for obvious reasons. So then what should you do? Don't panic just yet, because all hope is not lost for all you lone wolf freelancers out there. At least this has been the case with me, because in this day and age of the internet, and with all of these smartphone apps that are all around us, and especially with the rise of artificial intelligence like it has been doing in these past few years, there are more than just a few modern tools and techniques that you can employ as a lone wolf writer in this day and age, and often at little or no cost to you, that should really help your writings to become the best they possibly can be before clicking that post or publish button to unleash it into the world. So, were they then? Because many of you have been eagerly anticipating this moment. So, let's get to it. My number one and go-to program thus far on this YouTuber/freelancer writing journey has been Clipchamp. Clipchamp has been nothing short of a true champ on this writing journey for me, and I do very much recommend it to so many of you who are hearing this right now. Clipchamp's AI digital readers are some of the better ones out there right now, having been always quite convincing and very lifelike to my ears. I've heard better ones out there in these past few years, but for the money, which is basically zero for what I've been using it for, because it's freemiumware, it's hard to beat. If you got the latest version of Microsoft's Windows operating system, you should have this stupendous Clipchamp program pre-installed from the factory. The only downside is that it requires an internet connection to work, for whatever reason or reasons. And also, during their more busier times throughout the day, your desired AI voice may not be available because the demand for it is so high. But other than those few undesirables about it, it's been a really solid and really great program for me. I highly recommend it. But what if you're on the Apple platform? Well, unfortunately, there's not much I can help you with there, because I am not familiar with Apple products at all. They were always just a bit too expensive for me. But since you would need an internet connection to use Clipchamp anyways, if you have an internet connection on your Apple computer or handheld device, you should just be able to go on to Google's translation website and paste your writings into that web page to have Google's AI there, read your writing out loud and back to you, to really help you with this proofreading phase of your whole writing process. And of course, Windows OS users, if you have an internet connection, you should be able to easily do the same with your web browser there to utilize this Google Translator site as well. But Google's translation website's AI has never been as lifelike and realistic as Clipchamp's AI out loud readers. It still sounds a bit too old school robotic, at least with their English read out louds. And I have no idea about how natural their other languages sound when they are read out loud by Google's online AI, because the only native language that I have in my arsenal is English, But overall, Google's translator website isn't so bad at all, and is your next best option, I'd say, if Clipchamp isn't available to you. Where Google's online translator website really excels, though, is their impressive number of audible translations that they possess that you can treat your ears to. But that is another topic for a whole other video on a whole other day. So finally, this last major concern with all of these computer programs and online websites, writing tools usage must be addressed, because it's probably still going to happen for whatever reasons to a few of you. And what is it? The obvious last one. What if you're completely and totally offline and can't get to or are unable to acquire a solid and reliable internet connection at all for a good while? Because what if you're homeless and can't get that internet connection until the public library has opened for you to go and be able to connect there? Or what if you're camping and want to do a little bit of work while enjoying a few breaths of fresh air deep into the woods, but don't have any kind of internet connection out there to be made at all? Because that kind of stuff still happens to people from time to time, and even as recently as December of 2025. Well, my friend, if that's your situation, then you're in luck. You thought I was about to say, too bad, you're out of luck, didn't you? Nope, I got you, particularly if you're a Windows user like I am. 'Cause see, there's a Windows program called Balabalka that I was able to download and utilize for free during those times when I didn't have a solid and reliable internet connection for my laptop. It's been about a year since I downloaded this lovely program, by the way, so I'm not 100% certain that it's still available, but I'm pretty sure it still is. And also, download and use this Balabalka program at your own discretion and risk. I was advised to download it from a reputable and popular computing technologies website, but still, I'm just going to give this disclaimer now and tell you that you should download and run it on your devices at your own risk. Because I always make sure that I'm getting good advice and am not downloading anything from any sketchy or shady websites, or any website of ill repute to begin with. Because that's just common sense, you all. And after I've downloaded the installation file, I don't stop with my cautiousness there either. Nope. What I do then is scan virtually all installation files that I download with my virus scanner and spybot search and destroy program as well, before ever even installing them, let alone running them. But what are the downsides to this Balabalka program then, considering that it was a free download? Well, the biggest downside to it, I'd say, is that it really doesn't sound so great. It actually sounds a lot like how AI did when it was in its infancy, like in the mid-90s. But keep in mind that I'm talking about my 1-year-old version of it and haven't updated it since. So who knows if there have been any updates and improvements that were made to it since. But for both of Balabalka's available AI voices, they both just unfortunately sound a bit too much like a couple of really old-school AIs, with the female one being just a bit better or more lifelike and a bit easier on the ears to listen to. But it's hard to complain when it was a free download, and I've been able to use it offline when I couldn't get a good internet connection. So, better than nothing, right? And having Balabalka read your writings back to you offline, even if it's all done really archaically, technologically wise, is better than hearing your own voice reading your own writings back to you in your own head, that all too often just feels a bit too stale and lifeless, because it's you hearing your own voice again that you had already just heard when you first put down those lines. Unlike when you hear an outside or fresh new voice that reads your writings back to you, that makes it all just come so much more fresh and alive again. And by the way, when I'm listening to the AI read my writings back, I'm also following along careful with my eyes on my writing for obvious reasons, like spot errors and to make corrections as we go along. Also remember that this AI proofreading tool usage is a smart professional final phase, or near final phase, and should be a part of your writing process for when you aren't able to acquire a competent enough proofreader for these business, commercial, and professional writings of yours. So in other words, as you professional writers already know, We're trying to spot errors and mistakes with all of these modern tools to improve our writings and to make them as great as we possibly can, ultimately get them ready for that commercial consumption that we've been preparing them for. Or simply put, we're not just listening to the AI read our writings back to us for kicks and giggles, folks. Even though it may be a lot of fun sometimes to hear modern AI do just that, this video has been all about achieving the highest quality of commercial writings that we can possibly achieve with these modern digital tools that we may have at our disposal. And it has not been one that is focused on writing for yourself or for a friend or family member in private at all. Once again, this video is all about trying to achieve your highest level of commercial writing success possible with this quote-unquote gift of gab of yours that I'm assuming you have if you decide to click on this video. And always keeping in mind that commercial writing is basically nothing like personal writing. In fact, if you ask me, they are basically like comparing night to day. They are really that different from one another. The only similarities is basically the grammar, spelling, punctuation, and so on. And if you're serious about this business writing thing, you'll very quickly see what I mean when you get into this world of professional and commercial writings. So there you have it. Those are all the tools that I have been using for a little while now with my commercial writings, and the ones have been quite the lifesaver for me in these recent times of ours. 50 years ago, I would have had to make do with listening to a cassette recording of my own voice reading my own writings back to me, and more than likely would have had to continue to fight the fatigue of having to listen to my own same voice, time after time, again and again, and for days on end. What a unique kind of torture that probably would have been. And I wouldn't have a clue about what you would have had to do before the cassette tape was invented and made amply available to the general public either. Not to mention that to make any small edits and changes with that cassette system, I would have had to tediously re-record and replay myself over and over. Unlike today, where I can conveniently edit a single word on the fly, and with a super quick press of button, I can immediately hear a very lifelike AI voice beautifully reading my newly edited line back to me. That's our present day. We had a plethora of technologies available to us that have been helping to make life for freelance writers like myself just a bit easier and a bit more on the convenient side of life. And those technologies are the things that I've been focused on and have been going over throughout this video that I hope and believe that you will adopt and put to good use. And that they might also just make your own personal writing journey a bit easier and maybe even a bit more fun and enjoyable as well. So knowing all of that now, let's get to it then, ladies and gents, and make all of our writing goals and dreams a reality. Happy writing!